So we've got a little bit of a slow hand since we're on the draw, but it's definitely a keep. Certainly, how good the summary dismissal is going to depend on what our opponent's playing. But one of the issues with any 3-color deck is in this format is the mana. So we're not going to get to play our spells as soon as we would like to. But I am going to start on an Evolving Wilds. Our best draw this turn is going to be a basic land, because then we can cast all of our spells on time. And it looks like our opponent is likely playing green-white tokens. But, yep, no basic lands, so that's going to mean we're set back. If our opponent just curves out on us with something like a Nissa, or even just having a Gideon next turn is going to be good. Sometimes these games do come down to which player is on the play. Our opponent's on the play here. Advocate isn't bad. And we're pretty much stuck here passing the turn. Wow, it's actually going to be Gisela the Broken Blade here. Wasn't expecting that one. And now our opponent is going to get in with the Hangerback and the Sylvan Advocate. So, a little bit of a rough spot. We're definitely going to play the Rattle Chains here. And I think we unfortunately just kind of have to trade for the Hangerback, but it's not pretty, that's for sure. So this turn, I think I like playing the Mausoleum Wanderer here and then just passing. We can then play the Nebelgast to tap down the Gisela, because we definitely don't want that card getting in. And that's going to be able to boost our Mausoleum Wanderer. So we now have pretty decent blocks on the board. So we'll see what, if anything, our opponent decides to attack with here. We definitely have to be worried about stuff like Avacyn, and that makes blocking the Advocate less appealing for sure. So I think we just take this here. And it's going to be Athalia's Lancers, so it does look like our opponent is playing a little bit of a legendary combo deck and is going to search for Archangel Avacyn here, which is pretty good. And I think, well, we don't really have any great attacks here. I think we can get in with the Wanderer, maybe. Let's just pass here. This isn't a fun spot to be in, but we do have company which we can use. Although now we're seeing Westvale Abbey come down, so we're definitely going to cast the Collected Company here. And okay, wow! So we actually just completely bricked off Collected Company, which very rarely happens. And now we're just completely dead. We needed to hit something off of that company to have a chance against our opponent's draw, and we did not. So let's move to the sideboard. We can bring in Ojutai's Command. Our opponent looks to be very creature-based, so we want cards like Stasis Snare and Ojutai's Command. Our opponent could have Jamoka's Command in their deck, we don't know. But I think we want to be loading up on removal. We can also look at cards like Bygone Bishop. And we can shave some of our slower stuff. I think Tragic Arrogance could be good. We don't know exactly what our opponent's doing, but it's definitely a card to consider here. So I like the Stasis Snares, the Commands, the Bygone Bishops. This seems pretty solid. I'm fine with shaving some of our smaller spirits, but we don't want to go too low on creatures. As we saw, you can brick on Collected Company. So yeah, this seems fine. This seems fine. We're going to board in 1 Tragic Arrogance. And hopefully we have a better start. We're going to keep this. We have more lands than last game, which is nice. So just going to lead off on the Port Town, get our non-basic lands into play. We have Reflector Mage, which seems pretty solid against our opponent's deck. And we drew a Company, which was one of our best draw steps right now. So if our opponent has a Hangerback or an Advocate, we can simply Reflector Mage it here, which isn't bad. Although, since we drew Anafenza, I think now we actually play Anafenza. Anafenza has a pretty high upside, especially with a Company in our hand and multiple other creatures in our hand. To be able to hit creatures and then bolster onto them is pretty nice. Although our opponent could have something like a Dramoka's Command, for instance, just to get rid of this Anafenza. And remember, Anafenza is also a spirit. A lot of people do forget that. So expect our opponent to just level the Hangerback Walker and pass the turn here. Or I guess our opponent could not level it, but okay. There's the level. So I think we actually want to main phase the Company, even though it means that if we hit a Spell Queller, we're not going to be able to actually Spell Quell anything. We definitely want to play the Company with Anafenza still in play. So yeah, let's go ahead and just cast the Collected Company here. Alright, so we are going to get Reflector Mage and Spell Queller. And so we're just going to Reflector Mage to bounce the Advocate here. And we are going to be able to also make some big creatures, which is going to be quite relevant. So we'll see if our opponent has some type of a follow-up here or not. We could play Reflector Mage. We can also just hold up Avacyn here, which is pretty strong as well. So I think we want to just play the Reflector Mage, so let's do that. If our opponent has Dramoka's Command, it's not the worst thing for us here. So, okay. That is going to happen. We're going to put the counter on our mage. And now we're just kind of hoping our opponent doesn't have some type of mass removal. Gisela would also be... might be able to help our opponent back into the game, but it would be tough, and it looks like our opponent just got overwhelmed there. Our draw was quite good, admittedly, that game. Pretty much about as good as you could ask for. So, we are going to be on the draw for the final game, and now it's just time to consider exactly how we want to board. The Silk Wraps are an answer to Hangerback Walker and Sylvan Advocate. We have not seen cards like Dramoka's Command yet, but that doesn't mean our opponent isn't playing them. I think we want to be going on a little bit more of a control plan, though. So I think boarding in the Silk Wraps is fine. However, sometimes this means we have to shave a company just because we are cutting so many of our creatures. For instance, Mausoleum Wanderer, we haven't seen a ton of stuff that are a ton of instants and sorceries that our opponent has. But I think shaving on a company is fine. And we're just kind of going very much gonna be the control role here. And yep, I kind of like this configuration. We're now maximizing on Tragic Arrogance. Now we've got Silk Wrap, Stasis Snares. So we've got a lot of removal because we've seen cards like Gisela. We've seen a lot of creatures from our opponent. So we just want to basically be able to answer what our opponent's doing since we're on the draw. We're not going to be able to come out of the gates fast enough to stop completely what our opponent's doing. So we need cards that interact with our opponent's creatures. And we do have some in our hand. Declaration is nice against what we've seen. And then the Herald and the Mage, so pretty reasonable draw. And we're gonna start on these evolving wilds here, for sure. Alright, so there's the Hangerback for 1, which isn't really unexpected at this point. Alright, our draw step is Port Town, so I think I like actually playing the Port Town. We can reveal the Prairie Stream and just pass here, planning on playing Rattle Chains. So we'll see if our opponent... Okay, so our opponent is just playing a Sylvan Advocate. Which shouldn't be too much of a surprise. Now, we also saw cards like Thalia's Lancers for even more card advantage to kind of go over the top. So we do have to be worried about that stuff. Unfortunately, we haven't drawn any of our counterspells up to this point. So the plan is going to be to flash and Rattle Chains and then probably play Reflector Mage. Although there's also an argument to playing the Nebelgast Herald, which I kind of like. I kind of like playing the Nebelgast Herald here. Or I should say planning on playing the Nebelgast Herald. And yeah, we can always Reflector Mage. We can basically Reflector Mage whenever we want to, and holding it up for later turns seems like a reasonable plan. So we want to tap down the Sylvan Advocate here, since we know that's going to be a card that our opponent's definitely going to be attacking with. The Hangerback, on the other hand, our opponent might want to level up, so it doesn't make as much sense to tap it. Now we definitely do want to draw more spells. We've got a lot of lands up to this point. And I don't think we want to make this trade, so we're just going to take the damage. However, this is representing Gisela. It's a little bit scary. But yeah, we're going to take this. Okay, it's actually just going to be another Hangerback Walker. So we do have Declaration in Stone as one of the cards in our hand. We also have just drawn a copy of Bygone Bishop. So definitely a couple of different options here. But I think I like attacking here and then actually going ahead with the line of playing the Bygone Bishop. And we can flash that in, remember. Because we have the Rattle Chains, it means we can flash in the Bygone Bishop if we want to. So let's go ahead and do that. And we might as well go ahead and tap the Sylvan Advocate again. So here's a Stasis Snare. That's probably going to go after the Bygone Bishop here. So that's pretty good, actually, from our opponent. We hadn't seen much removal up to this point. But it looks like our opponent is realizing that they may need to race us. So we're at 14 apiece now. And that Bygone Bishop being gone is definitely not what we wanted to have happen, because it was one of the ways we could basically refuel our hand and gas back up. Now we don't have that anymore. So the draw step is Reflector Mage. So I think we want to just go ahead and try to end the game as quickly as possible here, which is going to mean Declaration and stoning away these Hangerback Walkers and casting Reflector Mage as well to bounce the Sylvan Advocate. The Declaration in Stone is pretty good here because our opponent may not even have time to go ahead and crack clues. Just because we are going to be putting a pretty fast clock on our opponent. So this is going to bring our opponent to 10. And then we're going to add the Reflector Mage to the board. And really just try to close the game out as quickly as possible. Basically, any creature our opponent plays here, if it's something like Athalia's Lancers, that's pretty bad news because our opponent can get Limvala or something else that is very, or okay, Archangel Avacyn. But we're still pretty much locked in on bouncing this Thalia's Lancers and just trying to end the game as quickly as possible. So that's gonna this attack is gonna bring our opponent down to 4. Something like a Linvala could be pretty good here. I would imagine that that's a card our opponent would be playing in a Thalia's Lancers deck. So, yeah, we're just kind of hoping for no whammies. Linvala would be pretty solid. So would a sweeper would basically be worst case scenario. Once again, something like a Planner Outburst. So it looks like our opponent's going to untap here, and we will see if they have a way of surviving this turn or not. Alright, here's a Sylvan Advocate coming down. That can block a Reflector Mage. And our draw step is a land, but we're still kind of priced in to attacking with everything here. And I don't think our opponent can have too much, although our opponent has not conceded yet, so hard to know exactly. Okay, wow, Blessed Alliance. That's actually pretty good. So that's going to force us to sack a Reflector Mage, and then our opponent is going to be able to block another Reflector Mage. So that was kind of a blowout, actually. Was trying to think what our opponent could possibly have. Ends up being Blessed Alliance for a bit of a blowout there. And we know that our opponent has the Archangel Avacyn in hand. But looks like the play is going to be popping a Clue. Could this be another Blessed Alliance? That would be real bad. Alright, it's going to be Dramoka's Command. We can't really do anything about that, but we drew Collected Company for the turn. So we could Company now, or we could wait. And I kind of like waiting here, actually. So let's go ahead and attack. And pass. So this is basically going to be the key turn here. We could collect a company right now to potentially tap the Sylvan Advocate. But I think we just go ahead and let this Advocate come through. That's going to drop us all the way down to 5. And our opponent's passing, so we're pretty much priced in now to casting the Collected Company. Wow, okay, our opponent has Hallowed Moonlight. That's really bad. That was really not good for us. So we would have got double Nebelgast. But unfortunately, that was pretty hard to actually play around, and now there's going to be a Stasis Snare. Didn't know about that one, that's for sure. And the draw step is Archangel Avacyn, so it's kind of depressing. If we had known about the Hallowed Moonlight, we definitely could have just won the game, but our opponent just as easily could have had some sort of sorcery speed removal. So I don't think we necessarily misplayed. but it did not work out. That's for sure. Alright, the draw step is Rattle Chain, so we're just going to pass. We know our opponent has an Avacyn of their own, which is going to come down here. And our opponent is going to get in with both creatures. And here's a Dromoka's command. And unfortunately, Rattle Chains only gives hexproof to spirits. Avacyn is not a spirit. So this is actually going to be lethal here. And that's going to be the match. Pretty unfortunate.